The Sailor from Amsterdam by Guillaume Apollinaire. The Dutch brig Alkmaar had returned from Java, loaded with spices and other precious cargo. She put in at Southampton, and the sailors were given shore leave. One of them, Hendrik Veersteeg, as he left the ship, took with him a monkey on his right shoulder, a parrot on his left, and round his waist a roll of Indian cloth, which he intended to sell, together with his animals, in the town. It was early spring, and night soon fell. Hendrik Veersteeg walked a good pace through misty streets, which the gaslights barely lit. The sailor was thinking of his next homecoming to Amsterdam, of his mother, whom he had not seen for 3 years, and of his fiancée, who was waiting for him on Monnikendam. He was reckoning up the money he could get for his animals and cloth, and looking at the same time for a shop where he could sell this exotic merchandise. In Above Bar Street, a respectably dressed man accosted him, asking him if he was looking for a buyer for his parrot. "This bird," he said, "would do me very well. I need someone to talk to me without me having to answer, for I live quite alone." Like most Dutch sailors, Hendrik Veersteeg spoke English. He gave a price to which the stranger agreed. "Follow me," said the latter. "I live quite a long way away. You personally will place the parrot in a cage which I have at home. You will then unpack your materials, and perhaps I should find one to my taste." Delighted with his good fortune, Hendrik Veersteeg went off with the gentleman, to whom he hoped he might also sell his monkey. He therefore began to praise the animal, explaining that it was of a rare species, and one of those who acclimatize themselves easily to England, and who become most attached to their masters. But Hendrik Veersteeg soon stopped talking. He was wasting his breath, because the stranger did not answer him. Indeed, he did not even seem to be listening. They continued on their way in silence, side by side. Only the monkey and the parrot, homesick for the tropical forest, gave signs of life. The monkey, frightened by the mist, occasionally gave a little cry, like the wail of a newborn child, and the parrot flapped his wings. After an hour's walk, the stranger said abruptly, "We're almost at my house." They had left the town behind them. Beside the road were great parks, entered through wrought iron gates. Sometimes through the trees the lighted windows of a cottage shone. At intervals, at sea, one could hear the sinister moaning of a ship's siren. The stranger stopped before a wrought iron gate, pulled a bunch of keys from his pocket, and opened the door, closing it after Hendrik Veersteeg had passed through. The sailor was impressed, but a little wary. At the far end of the garden, a little villa of quite handsome appearance could dimly be seen, but its shutters did not let out a single ray of light. The silent stranger and the lifeless house were both somewhat sinister, but Hendrik recalled that the stranger had said that he had lived alone. "He's an eccentric," he thought, and since Dutch sailors are not rich enough to be worthy enticing away and robbing, he was ashamed of his moment's anxiety. "Light the way if you have a match," said the stranger, as he thrust the key into the lock of the front door. The sailor obeyed, and when they were inside the house, the stranger brought a lamp and lit it, revealing a tastefully furnished room. Hendrik Veersteeg felt completely reassured. He had already high hopes that his curious companion would buy most of his material. The stranger, who had left the drawing room, returned with a cage. "Put your parrot in there," he said. "I won't have it on a perch until it is tamed, and I can say what I wish it to say." After closing the cage behind the frightened bird, he asked the sailor politely to take the lamp and go into the next room, where he said he would find a table suitable for his displaying his cloth. Hendrik Veersteeg obeyed and went into the room pointed out to him. Immediately he heard the door close behind him and the key turn in the lock. He was a prisoner. Startled, he quickly put the lamp down on the table and prepared to run at the door and break it down, but a voice stopped him short. "One step, sailor, and you're a dead man." Looking up, Hendrik saw, through a skylight which he had not noticed before, the barrel of a revolver trained on him. Terrified, he stood still. There was no question of fighting. His knife could not help him in the circumstances. Even a revolver would have been useless. The stranger who held him at his mercy was protected by the wall beside the skylight, from which he could watch every movement of the sailor, and through which only his hand, holding the revolver trained on him, passed. "Listen to me carefully," said the stranger, "and obey me. The compulsory service which you are about to render me will be rewarded, but you have no choice. You must obey me without hesitation, otherwise I shall kill you like a dog. Up in the drawer in the table, there is a 6-chamber revolver in it, loaded with only 5 cartridges. Take it out." The Dutch sailor obeyed, almost without knowing what he was doing. The monkey on his shoulder shrieked with terror and trembled all over. The stranger said, "There is a curtain at the end of the room. Draw it aside." Drawing the curtain, Hendrik saw an alcove in which a woman lay on a bed, bound and gagged. She looked at him with terrible despair in her eyes. "Untie the woman," said the stranger, "and remove the gag." When this was done, the woman, who was young and admirably beautiful, threw herself on the knees below the skylight and cried, "Harry, this is an infamous trap. You enticed me to this villa in order to kill me. You pretended that you had rented it for us to pass the first days of a reconciliation in it together. I believed that I had convinced you. I thought you were finally certain I had never been guilty. Harry, Harry, I'm innocent." "I do not believe you," said the stranger dryly. "Harry, I'm innocent," repeated the young woman in a choking voice. "Those are your last words," he said. I register them in my mind with care, for I shall have them repeated to me over and over again, all my life." Here the stranger's voice shook a little, but soon grew firm again. "Because I still love you," he added. "If I loved you less, I should kill you myself. But for me this would be impossible, because I love you. Now, sailor, if before I count to 10 you have not put a bullet into the head of this lady, you will fall dead at her feet yourself. 1, 2, 3. Before the stranger had time to count to 4, Hendrik, terrified, fired point blank at the woman, who, still on her knees, looked him straight in the face. She fell face downwards. The bullet had entered her forehead. Immediately afterwards, a second shot rang out from the skylight, hitting the sailor in the right temple. He fell back on the table, while the monkey, emitting the most piercing shrieks of terror, hid itself in his pea-jacket. The next day, passers-by, having heard strange cries coming from a cottage on the outskirts of Southampton, told the police, who soon arrived and broke down the door. They found the bodies of the young woman and the sailor. The monkey suddenly leaped at them out of his master's pea-jacket and jumped in the face of one of the policemen. He frightened them all to such an extent that they stepped back a few paces and shot him with a revolver before daring to approach again. The law made inquiries. It seemed certain that the sailor had killed the lady and then committed suicide. Nevertheless, the circumstances of the crime seemed curious. The 2 corpses were identified without difficulty, and people asked themselves how it could have been that Lady Fingal, wife of an English lord, had found herself alone in an isolated house in the country with a sailor who had arrived in Southampton only the night before. The owner of the villa could give no information that was of much help to the police. The cottage had been rented 8 days before to a man who gave the name of Collins, from Manchester, who incidentally could not be traced. He wore glasses and had a long grey beard, which may as well have been false. Lord Fingal himself arrived from London in haste. He adored his wife, and his sorrow was painful to see. Like everyone else, he could make nothing of the affair. Since then, he has withdrawn himself from the world and lives alone in his house in Kensington, save for a dumb servant and a parrot which constantly repeats the word, "Harry, I'm innocent."